Welcome to Ecologic for the month of February. God, this day is blooming realize what a beautiful time of the year. Spring is with us, I think. Hopefully, we're not going to get any more frost. I planted 40 tomatoes, so I'm in real trouble if the frost comes. Tonight's topic, we're going to talk about an update on the Vermilion and the work we've done to improve the flood situation, and then kind of a discussion of the coastal zone, the loss of wetlands in Louisiana's coastal zone, and why this is happening. Um, it's it's an environmental disaster that has almost worldwide implications. So starting off with one of the things that St. Martin Parish has done is they dredged and cleared out the Joe Dade Canal. And that is a drain that was suggested by the Corps after the flood of '93. They realized that the Cypress Island Swamp was a main retention zone for Lafayette area, and it only had one outlet. It had to drain back through Lafayette. And so their suggestion was to improve and link up the Joe Dade Canal and Cypress Island Swamp with the Bayou Teche on the lower end of the Keystone Dam, and which really links it right up to Lake Foss Point. And Lake Foss Point essentially stays at sea level, and it's a 15-mile trip from Cypress Island to Lake Foss Point, and it's an enormous watershed that goes right into the bay. And it's a much larger waterway than the Vermilion. And so the plan now is to, with the help of St. Martin Parish, to open the Joe Dade. And we've had high water in the Vermilion for the last month or so. The water's high in the Cypress Island Swamp. And so a couple of days ago, we went and measured the flow rate and to see if this whole concept of draining Cypress Island into Lake Foss Point was working, and indeed it is. The water level at Cypress Island is 2.5 feet higher than the water level at Lake Foss Point, and it's draining quite well. At one point we measured at the highway right through the UL Farm, the flow rate there was right at 400 cubic feet per second. The flow through Surrey Bridge is 1,200 cubic feet per second, and the flow rate over the Bayou Teche is around 500. So it's a very significant percentage of the entire flow, and that's going to mean a lot in lowering water levels in the whole Lafayette, whole Bayou Vermilion watershed. So quite a success. And then one of the big issues we're dealing with is to dump the flood into Henderson. That doesn't work very well because Henderson is all blocked with levees and pipeline spoil banks and so forth. And one of those spoil banks that blocks the whole system is the Dixie Pipeline, which was installed in the '60s. And it left two very high spoil banks across the whole swamp. Working with CRIPA, Louisiana's Coastal Restoration Program, that project should have been done last fall. It got delayed for one reason or another, but it is going to be done probably the next 2 or 3 months. So that'll mean a lot when we need to take the flood out of Bayou Catawba and the Teche and the Vermilion and move it towards the Chafly Basin. So 2 success stories coming out on that. We've worked a lot with the RAB Levy Board, and that's being reorganized for one reason or another. It had a 3-member board. That's going to be increased to a 7-member board. The legislature is going to be reorganizing that, and that they manage all the levees and the impoundments roughly above Catawba. It includes St. Landry, Avoyelles, and Rapides Parish, but certainly has an impact on Evangeline Parish. And so that whole board is being reorganized, and because they are a very important partner in dealing with the flood that's coming down. In the flood of '16, there were 10,700 homes flooded. 8,000 was on the Vermilion, and that happened mainly because the water coming from the north was overwhelming the Vermilion. It's blocked by lots of dams, and the Vermilion is very small, and it just can't handle it. And it's an important figure to remember in this, that during that flood of '16, of the 10,700 homes flooded, 73% had less than a foot. And it's kind of been our goal to work with the waterways and the people who manage and run it to see if any future event we could lower it by 1 foot. Enormous difference. That would have meant almost 8,000 homes wouldn't have flooded had we lowered the water 1 foot. We know, for instance, the dam that drained Henderson was closed when this event took place. Had that dam been open, probably would have lowered things a foot, because the water level on the Chaffelire was at 8 feet, and Henderson got to well over 24 feet very quickly because the water can't go through, and the gates at the bottom were closed. So we have to think if those gates had been open, we would have had a 16-foot head, which means we'd had high velocity and an ability to drop that. So, but nobody knew who managed the gates, and even if they could be open, these gates need to be replaced. One of the things that we've worked on too is Henderson needs to be able to handle a lot more water, and to accommodate that, if we could drop water into the Chaffelire River via the old Catawba waterbed, we could drain Henderson very quickly, and in effect take a lot of pressure off the Vermilion and the Teche and dump it into the Chaffelire River where it needs to go and where it historically did go. I was on by Catawba last week, and it was kind of interesting that the Henderson level is at over 18 feet, and by Catawba near Cross Springs was probably at about 4 or 5 feet. There's presently no connection between the Henderson Swamp and the old Bayou Catawba. So those things make a big difference. We've had a lot of water this spring so far, and which has held the bayou very, very high. We certainly made progress. This Joe Day Canal functioning at 400 cubic feet per second with only a 2-foot head, that flow would only increase dramatically as the Cypress Island swamp got higher and higher. So we're very pleased that that's a big success, it's working, and that's one of the cogs in the wheel that would bring this goal of lowering the water level of 1 foot or more during the worst flood situation. So we're very pleased to announce that. One of the things I've been looking at real hard is the land loss that is affecting all of South Louisiana. It's affecting our insurance rates. I think one of the reasons that a lot of people are leaving Louisiana is they're leaving from these hurricane-prone impacted area like Cameron Parish and Terrebonne Parish, and you go down to Cocoa Tree, and you go down to all those communities below Houma. They've just been devastated. And you can see that people are moving out. And because, it's one hurricane after another. QIPA did a survey of the area between the Mississippi River and the Atchafalaya after Hurricane Ida. And their drone survey that showed that Ida cost and brought 3,800 38 square miles of loss. So that's roughly around 20,000 acres that we lost just from that one hurricane. They lost 9 of their restoration projects, totally lost them. So that doesn't bode well. Hurricanes are, something that's a real power to reckon with and can do a lot of damage to homes and businesses, farmland, but also it does damage to the marshes. So when we look at why are we losing all this marshland, and to understand it, I think you have to go back to a geologic history of the zone. LSU did a study in the middle 60s that looked at the average deposition across the Gulf over the last 30,000 years. And this survey showed, and study showed, that average across the Gulf of Mexico in 30,000 years, the deposition rate was 30 feet, or 1 foot per 1,000 years. At the same time, they're looking at Louisiana coastal zone. And the coastal zone deposition from the continental shelf north is an amazing 670 feet. So this is 2.2 feet per century. This phenomenal growth was aided by the fact that the Mississippi every 700-800 years, 1,000 years would change course. And each time it changed, it brought the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Ohio, the Platte, the Arkansas, the Red, the Atchafalaya, all the materials that were coming out of those enormous river systems built land further and further out. Sycamore Point is one of those Mississippi River systems going back 10,000 years ago. By Sally was another, of course, by LaFourche, and so on, way off towards St. Bernard. The river formed the Chandelier Island, way to the east. The furthest to the west the Mississippi came was the Vermilion Bayou, which goes back to, according to an LSU study of 1949, the Vermilion was the Mississippi 60,000 years ago, and it left 2 prominent oxbows behind. One is the Big Woods Palmetto Park system between Abbeville and Intracoastal City, and the second oxbow was the Cypress Island Swamp, and that was the river 60,000 years ago, according to that LSU study. So with those changes, though, the broadcast material from 32 states, 41% of the continental U.S., parts of 4 Canadian provinces, drained uninhibited, carrying all the material that was maybe left behind by glaciers, a whole list of, high water events that eroded material and brought it all the way down to us, including the Red River and the Atchafalaya. That whole system was operating somewhat independent of the Mississippi. Although they were connected, they were a flow, 30% of the entire flow was the Atchafalaya Red system. So what changed it? Starting about probably beginning of the 20th century, we started doing things different. We started building dams around the country. The 1927 flood was horrific. It was put thousands and thousands of people and communities underwater for a long period. Almost put New Orleans underwater, but somehow by blowing up the levees on the west side, New Orleans was spared. And of course they blew up the levees on this side. The levees at Henderson were blown up. The levees, they called it the convict levee there. The levees were not very high. The levees now around 31, 32 feet. Those old levees were around 24. And the water came, around Butler Rose to 28 or 29. So the levees would have been top, but anyway. So, but after the 1928 Flood Control Act, these enormous levees were built. And these levees were built with kind of total disregard of the fact that the river systems from the Shelf Line of Mississippi distributed the flood sediment all through the Louisiana coastal zone. And so, but the levees pretty much closed all of those. One of the biggest closures was the Grand River, which was part of the Shelf Line. It actually starts at Beulah Rose and went to the southeast towards Verdonville and all that area. And it was divided into 5 or 6 branches through Terrebonne Parish, by Black, by Kokoda, by Buff, by Delage. All those were major tributaries of the Chafalaya, and they were river tributaries. And it's kind of interesting that a civil engineer wrote a critique of the plan to abandon the Grand River and those major waterways that brought sediment to the Barry Islands and to the marshes of Terrebonne Parish. He was right. Of course, nobody cared about the marshes of Terrebonne Parish or the Barry Islands. You couldn't hardly get to them, and they were very remote, and the marsh was full of snakes and alligators and mosquitoes and horseflies, and people thought they were worthless areas. So that critique went probably unheeded, but he predicted the loss of the Barry Islands and the loss of coastal wetlands without the continuous flow from the Chafalaya Red system. And so what the big levees didn't close, the intercoastal did. The levees were finished in 1935. The intercoastal was finished in 1939. And as they built it across the entire state and all the way across to Texas and so forth, but they closed all the waterways on the south side. Nearly all of them were closed, except major navigation waterways. But like Bayou Sycamore, Bayou Sally, these waterways carried navigation, but they were totally closed when they built the intercoastal. But they were also part of the major distribution network of bringing fresh water and sediment into the entire coastal area. So with that, while we are building all the levees and the intercoastal, we also building dams around the country. Now each dam in the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Arkansas, you name it, is a nail in the coffin of Louisiana's coastal land loss. Because when you dam the river, it no longer carries sediment and it reduces fresh water flow. But the main thing, the sediment that built the whole coastal zone has been curtailed. Now, how many dams do we have? There's 32 states in the distribution network. I just looked it up. And these are dams that are controlled by dam safety programs in the various states. Arkansas, we have 1,090. Oklahoma, 4,700. Missouri, 3,600. Nebraska, 2,800. Just between those 12 states is 12,000 dams. And we have 28 more states. The Mississippi has 29 dams on it. The Missouri has 6 major dams on it. The Ohio has 22. And so the mighty Mississippi is not so mighty anymore. We have curtailed and blocked. The Missouri, according to one estimate, the distribution network of the Missouri has And the Missouri is 2,200 miles long. It's actually about 20 miles longer than the Mississippi. It has 17,200 dams on it. And so all the drainage of fields and topsoils that nourished and built the coastal zone, and getting back to that geologic study of 30,000 years, those 670 feet that was built over 30,000 years, that's not happening. That build rate was at 2.2 feet per century. That is totally gone. That's all in the back of dams. The Red River, just in Louisiana, we have 6 major dams on it. There is no sediment comes down the Red River anymore. The Red River was 30% of the total flow between the Mississippi and the whole, what they call lateral flow. 30% came down the Red. That's not happening anymore. So, and then to make matters much worse, this whole 6-7 million acres of coastal wetlands, the whole concept of managing those wetlands was changed. There was between the Federal Reserves and private landowners, there was a decision to condemn the wetlands and put dams. We have 39 dams on Marsh Island. We built a levied-in impoundment that's 11 miles long, 3 miles wide. It's 33 square miles on the southwest side of Marsh Island. And this is an area where cattle grazed, where they had a landing strip there. And when they built this big levee and impoundment, it's all turned into a big open lake. The cattle aren't there anymore. It's now, anytime you condemn the wetlands, you lose all the wetlands plants. You lose all the wetlands functions as far as fisheries. And probably 90% of Louisiana total coastal zone has been shut down as a wetland. You take the White Lake, Grand Lake system, enormous area that goes, from south of Abbeville all the way to Lake Charles, and it's 50 miles long and easily 20 miles wide. So you got 1,000 square miles of wetlands that are no longer wetlands. It's behind dams that roads, and it's maintained at 3 foot above sea level, which was ideal for the tugboats, but was not very good for ducks in growing the plants necessary, to support shrimp and ducks and the whole works. A wetland is a wet and dry system, and all over the entire area we've impounded it. That's true of Rockefeller, that's true of Lacassine, Cameron Parish. They turned the marsh into lakes, and a lake is not a wetland, it's an impoundment. So with that, we're not going to lose all the shrimp, because a shrimp can't jump a dam, and neither can a juvenile speckled trout. So all of this is happening, with enormous loss of fisheries. The shrimp industry is pretty much gone. The oyster industry is pretty much gone. Oysters feed on what they call decaying vegetation, biomass. Now if you close the bayou, you destroy all the wetland plants, you destroy all the fisheries, and you destroy, if you destroy the plants, you no longer have the decaying vegetation that feeds the whole ecosystem. Just how much of an impact? The figures that I had go back to 1985. We had 38,700 commercial shrimping licenses sold by Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries in 1985. 1995 is 10,200. 2015 is less than 2,000. So this whole industry is pretty much gone. I spoke to one of the buyers of oysters. About a third of the oysters in Louisiana were harvested from Terrebonne to Cameron Parish. He hadn't bought a sack of oysters in that area in 5 years. And the big question is, why is it happening? Why can't oysters grow? This is an area that had enormous oyster production, phenomenal oyster production, and it's not happening. The oysters get going, they get to 8 or 9, they have to grow about 2 years. They get to 8 or 9 months old, and some bad water comes and kills them all. An oyster can live in fresh water. We've got a phone call. Can we help you?
Yes, can I speak to Harold Shepherd?
You got him. How are you doing?
All right, Harold. Hey, this is Daryl. Hey, before you do, kind of back up on your topics tonight here, but you were talking about the Joe Day Canal and improvements that was made on that Joe Day Canal, and that drains that Cypress Island swamp. And I kind of assume that Cypress Island swamp has probably the same elevation pretty much across there. Is there sufficient openings into the Joe Day Canal for the Cypress Island swamp to be able to drain down into that Joe Day, and then Joe Day basically drain it dry? What happened? Can you talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. There were some high points that they had to degrade. They were kind of stuff at 13, 14 foot elevation, and most of Cypress Island is at 4 or 5 foot elevation, or even less. And so not only did they clean out and clear out the Joe Day Canal system, but they degraded some of those high points to allow it to connect to the Cypress and LaSalle coolers and to the whole, Cypress Island system. The fact that we were getting that flow indicates it's working quite well, so we're all excited about that. It definitely does make a difference.
Well, that's pretty important into that swamp to be able to pull that swamp down to basically to a dry level here.
The quicker we can drain it, the better off we are. If it stays flooded and of a long duration and another flood comes, then we're in trouble. And that happened in 2019. We had a flood in mid-May, and brought the water to around 11 or 12 feet. And then 3 weeks later, the water had only drained to about 8, and we had a 4 or 5 inch rain, and it put Lafayette up to 14 feet. Mainly because Cypress Island was still quite full and didn't have enough time to drain. So this is real important, this additional drainage. And it's a continuous thing, so it's, they don't have gates in it. They thought of putting gates, but it's just wide open, which I think is probably the best way for it to be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like that it will drain it down to where most of that swamp will go dry during the summertime and the
Yes.
top part of our summer?
Yes, and that's very important. The Nature Conservancy is a major owner, and their concern is they're losing lots of trees because the whole system stays flooded all the time. And part of that is, the Tetra Million keeps pumping, and they keep, the water at Surrey Bridge at 5 feet when it could go down to 3. Keep it at 5 feet is keeping a bunch of water in Cypress Island, but this will maybe drain it lower. Hopefully it will, because it's moving at 400 cubic feet per second. That's a very conservative estimate. That's a significant flow.
Yeah, that's certainly be good for everything, not only trees, but wildlife and everything else. That thing can go down and dry out during the summer, late summer.
Yeah, a wetland is wet and dry, and if you keep it flooded all the time, it's not a wetland, because you can think of your wife's flower pots. Your wife's flower pots do well because you water them every now and then and so forth. But if you fill your bathtub with water and put those flower pots in the bottom of that tub, that's going to be the end of them. And that's what happens when you flood a wetland and you keep it flooded all the time. That's what we've done at Marsh Island, we've done at Rockefeller, we've flooded those whole wetland systems, and that means we kill all the wetland plants. You kill all the plants, you know, the only thing holding the marsh together is the plants. Anybody who's walked the marsh will quickly tell you, you know, always step on the grass. If you don't, you're gonna sink up to your waist. So, I mean, so that's a sensitive system, and a healthy marsh will have about 300 different species of plants. But when you impound it, you virtually lose all of that. And when you lose the roots of the plants, you know, you lose it. The whole system falls apart. And then you lose, you know, people don't realize how important that coastal zone is to the entire Gulf of Mexico. The coastal wetlands produce the richest land on the face of the earth. They produce 5 to 10 tons of biomass per year. Now, if you put a dam in front of the bayou, that's the end of that. You're killing all the plants, you're losing all that biomass. All that White Lake system, you know, 1,000 square miles, produces no biomass. And that's something like 20% of Louisiana's whole coastal marshes that we keep flooded for whatever reason, because of need for fresh water for rice, and, you know, the whole area is converted to sugarcane, so we're not using so much water. So anyways,
Harold, thank you very much for your data there. I appreciate that.
well, thanks for your input, but that's a real success, is to have the swamp draining. We gotta drain the swamp.
There you go.
Right.
Thank you now.
So, thank you, Darrell. Thank you for the call.
All right.
So anyway, so with the coastal zone, we're losing easily 100,000 acres a year. And how do we we're kind of fixing it? Is it working? One of the things we're doing is to put barriers in front of the beaches, either bulkheads or rocks. Well, that's never worked. A good example of that, you can go today to Rutherford Beach, and right where you drive up to the beach, they have placed rocks. There's no rocks east of that. But you can see where the shoreline 2 years ago was straight and level, where they put the rocks, the beach has washed back 500 feet in 200 years. So what a disaster. Can we help you?
Yes, Harold, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good.
Good. You know, it would be helpful if you talk a little bit about the history of, and it's not a very pleasant history, but the history of how the Corps of Engineers has been the main character in the drama of sort of forcing all the water from Alexandria down, that comes down through the Tesh-Vermilion watershed, and making almost all of it go down the Vermilion River. And
Yeah, I'll be glad to go over that history, because it's a real, you know, understanding what happened in the past kind of tells us why we are where we are, and so anyway, I'll go over that real good. Thank you for
the crowning achievement of that, if you will, or the crowning blow, which has not been good for Lafayette net, is this Tesh-Vermilion freshwater district, which is required to maintain Bayou Catawba flood stage.
yeah.
And despite what, remarkably, some people that work for the Tesh-Vermilion freshwater district have tried to tell us that Bayou Catawba has no impact on water levels on the Vermilion, which is, pure balderdash. And so,
Yeah, absolutely.
When we had Barry, the same guy that told us that the Bayou Catawba water levels don't affect the Vermilion marched up in front of the city council wagging his tail and told them all how he'd saved us by lowering water levels on Bayou Catawba because the water doesn't go down the Vermilion. So which time are you telling the truth and which time are you not telling the truth?
Yeah.
And I don't want to get mean and nasty here, but this whole situation with the Corps of Engineers, the Tesh-Vermilion freshwater district, and flooding all the farmers up in the Boyle, San
Yep.
freshwater district,
Yep,
at the behest, who was governed by the Corps of Engineers.
absolutely.
And you know, it reminds me of a poem. The history of the Corps of Engineers and running the test Vermilion water system reminds me of the poem. The title of the poem is Their Love Life. You know, one failure on top of another, and that's all it's been. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been a disaster, and they need, you know, those guys are they try to do good things, but
Reminds me of a saying, somebody asked, what's the difference between the Army and the Boy Scouts? And the comment was, the Boy Scouts have adult leaders. So,
okay, thanks, Dan.
so I'll go with that history because it's real important. It helps us understand where we are. So you go back, and I mentioned this in coastal restoration, one of the big, environmental changes for Louisiana was the 1927 flood and all the things that happened with that. So they built a massive levee system, which took this was an emergency project, well-funded, and the levees were finished in 1935. For our area, one of the worst things that happened with the levee building was the closed Bayou Catawba, because lots of the waters from Evangeline, Avoyelles, Rapides came down and to Catawba. And so if Catawba historically drained, it was a big waterway, drained right into the Chaffalot River, right below Krotz Springs. So the levee closed that, and then they further closed it when they built the mainline levees were built by 1935. By 1953, 54, inside guide levees were built, and that kind of put Henderson into a big impoundment area. So, but closing Catawba set the water down to Bayou Teche. Now, the problem with the Bayou Teche is a dam on it. And so the only unrestricted flow without a dam is down to Vermilion. Now, the Bayou Teche is much bigger than the Vermilion. The Bayou Teche is 15 feet deep and 200 feet wide. The Vermilion is 7 to 8 feet deep and 100 feet wide. So, but this plan forced 70% of the entire watershed down to Vermilion, because it couldn't go down to Teche because it's closed. So the Vermilion is carrying much water. That's why the flood of 2016, of the 10,700 homes that flooded from Alexandria to Vermilion, Abbeville, the 8,000 was on the Vermilion watershed. In St. Martin, in St. Landry, in Lafayette Parish, which had most of the homes, over 5,000, and Vermilion Parish had about 1,500, all along the Vermilion. So it was made worse by the fact that a couple of other things that happened that forced more water. They built the Red River and Bennett Johnson reservoirs. These were 6 dams on the Red River, and it raised the water at Alexandria was in pool 2. Each pool was 10 feet high, and so the water level on the Red River at Alexandria raised to 20 feet, which means that Rapides Parish could no longer drain into the Red River. So now it's draining down to us through Bayou de Glade. Now that's a real problem because the gate that drained Bayou de Glade into the Chaffalot River at Simmsport was closed. So that whole watershed, and the Bayou de Glade watershed alone is 274 square miles. For comparison, all of Lafayette Parish is around 253 square miles. So the equivalent of all Lafayette Parish now is forced down. All of Rapides Parish, most of the Falls Parish would drain into the Chaffalot Red River. That's all stopped. So it's all heading to us. And then to make, this wouldn't be as bad as we have enormous wetlands in that course from Alexandria down towards Catawba. But the Tesh Vermilion system, which was kicked off around 1985, $50 million project, and the plan is set up by the Mississippi River Commission of the Corps of Engineers. And the plan is not run by Tesh. The guidelines is cast in country, is set by the Corps, and it requires that we keep water flowing down to Vermilion and the Tesh. We have to keep 3 inches of water over the Tesh Dam, and which brings a lot of water down to Vermilion. But to do that, we have to keep Catawba right at flood stage. Now, flood stage at Catawba is 19 feet. We keep it at 18 with pumps. And that's a real problem because the wetlands that normally take the flood waters from a big flood, from Rapides and Evangeline and of oils, is in the Buff Cocoa Swamp, in the Thistlewaite Swamp, in the Waukesha Swamp, and Darball Swamp. About 200,000 acres of swamps, and some of that includes on by Carone towards Ville Platte. There's smaller swamp areas that's in that watershed. But if you keep it all at 18 feet, you keep those things flooded. So if you keep the swamp flooded, it's no longer retention, and it's no longer wetland. Property owners have lost their trees have died, their rice farms have been closed, they cannot, one family built levees around 970 acres. They put pumps to be able to keep their rice farms going, and the water would go right under the levee. So they spent a fortune to try to retain their farming, but unsuccessfully. And that family had another 900 acres of woodland, bottomland forest, that was wet and dry. It was a wetland, but it's at 16-foot elevation. So if you keep Catawba at 18, it's on 2 feet underwater and killed all their trees. And they sued in federal court on that. They lost the suit because there's a 6-year statute of limitations. They lost the suit over their rice field because this event started in '85 and they weren't filing suit till '95, which is 4 years past the statute of limitations to bring an action in federal court. But they couldn't put a timetable on the dying trees, so they ended up on a one-time basis paying for the trees. But the important thing is, with the dying trees, we're losing the wetlands and we're losing the retention. And, you know, we knew this was happening, and, you know, when Hurricane Barry came, the weather models of the U.S. Weather Service and USGS both agreed we would have water at Washington at 34 feet, flood stage is 27. We'd have water in Lafayette at 17, flood stage is 10. At 17, most of the waters that flooded in those 16 would have flooded again. About 99% of them would have flooded again. So to avert that, we shut the pumps off. Let me get, hello, can we help you?
Yes, this is your guest that forgot to show up tonight, so he's guilty.
Oh, wow. We tried to cover it. I think we got it. So I should have reminded you this morning when we had breakfast together.
Oh, yeah.
I tried calling you, but you weren't answering the line, so.
From church. My ring was off from church, and so I missed it.
Wow, okay. We'll
Are we on the air right now?
we very much on the air, so you might share with us what your thoughts are about the success on Joe Day.
Well, you know, when we went out there, we had a 2.45 foot head difference between the swamp, which we used the gauge at the Lake Martin Bridge Road. That's a USGS gauge at the Lake Martin Bridge Road, and another USGS gauge
Yeah, it has to be very close to, they're so closely connected.
Right. So the promising thing was that without a whole lot of water in at the Lake Martin Bridge Road, we were still getting very good drainage down to the Bayou Teche, south of Keystone. So there's been many times we've been, it's been out there scouting, surveying, and lots of times that Joe Day Canal, the water in there was totally not moving at all.
Yeah,
So, when we were out there, it had an extremely good flow. So that was very, very promising, to see that water flowing like that. When we're not having an incident, So.
well, that has to be, the quicker we can drain Cypress Island, the better off we are. And so,
Yeah,
and when Cypress Island goes down, Surrey Bridge is going down, and you can see it dropping pretty drastically. And the more flow we have, the more scouring occurs, and, that's gonna be very beneficial.
right. And, I talked to St. Martin Parish about meeting with their new public works director, and we're gonna attempt to get the engineering drawings on the Joe Daig improvements, so we can provide those engineer, dimensions to UNO Engineering Department, who is maintaining a model of the swamp and the river.
I think
So,
Dr. Habib is very interested in realizing and knowing that system is functioning. That was a core project that was recommended way back in the 90s. So, but the credit really has to go to St. Martin Parish, who has funded this and have done it. So, really, thank you and congratulations. That we need to share with their council that this is working. It is flowing.
Right. People may not know the story, but they went several years of trying to get permits to do their projects down in St. Martin Parish, and they did not give up. Going back to the Corps of Engineers till they finally got their permits.
Yeah,
So to their credit,
yeah. I mean,
to their credit, they stayed with it,
they were.
did the project, and it works.
Yeah, and they were almost 2 years getting these permits. And it's kind of interesting that they had that difficulty because this was a project recommended by the Corps. That should have been automatic that they got those things. It's a shame it was delayed, so.
Well, the story I heard from the public works director at the time when they were trying to get the permits was that they had a negative comment they had to deal with, actually from Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries.
Really?
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, white, yeah, wow. And the Nature Conservancy, meeting with them, and they are biggest landowner in the Cypress Island area. They own about 18,000 acres. And their big concern is they were staying flooded all the time. And the trees, the red oaks and, water oaks and so forth, they were losing because that's the first trees to go when you impound a wetland. These are bottomland hardwood swamps. These are wetlands, but they can't stay underwater all the time.
Right. Well, another couple points regarding, I heard you speaking about the Teche versus the Vermilion. People need to realize the Teche don't have really any drains going into the Teche other than that Joe Daig Canal down
Right.
the Keystone Dam from the headwaters. Okay, nothing significant. There's some minor ditches that drop in there, and they certainly don't have any concrete coulees like the
No.
Vermilion has.
No.
And the unintended consequence of building a concrete coulee that basically deposits the silt in the Vermilion River right near the confluence of the concrete coulees and the river. So they don't have that problem in the Teche.
Right, and people are, we constantly talk about the water coming from the north, and because when you look at the numbers for 016, we know how much water went north at the Surrey Bridge, and that was like 42,000 surface acre feet, and almost 300,000 surface acre feet came out. So when you look at the actual water that flooded us, Lafayette's water didn't flood us. The combination and the fact that the water was going backwards, which acted as a dam and raised the water level continuously, So it's, hopefully we become aware of these things and hopefully we can manage them a lot better. And, I still think that a diversion on the Ile de Con would make a big difference in diverting that water straight south rather than allowing it to go north into Cypress Island.
Right.
So anyway, I think, part of this whole drainage system ties to a lot of other, the Jaws, which is the main drain for the whole Tetra system, is closed, which is certainly something that does raise water levels. And how much we don't know, but it may be a foot. But to someone who got, 6 inches of water in their home, a foot is a big difference. So every inch is very important to homeowners who may avoid flooding by several inches. Super important that we, deal with all these issues and keep plugging along with the politicians.
Right.
And
So,
so
I
it's,
came into the program a little late. Did y'all discuss the Dixie?
we did. That's
Dixie
we
pipeline.
talked about the Dixie pipeline and us meeting with the Quipper rep at the at their meeting a couple of days ago, and they announced that the project would go on. They wouldn't wait for the low water. They would do it by barge, and so that's very important to get done because it allows us to put more flood water in the Shotfly system rather than come down to Lafayette.
Right, right. So what people don't see is the fact that the water has been running over those weirs at Bayou Catawba down to Bayou Amy because the basin, the floodway will not take the water.
Right.
So the water remains high in the whole Catawba system. And it actually has been topped the weir for almost 2 months in a row before the water receded enough or fell enough to where it got below the top of the weir.
That must be just the last couple of days.
Yeah, that's just in the last couple of days it fell below the top of the weirs. It actually was so bad a couple of years ago with these extended periods of time of the water overflowing the weirs, the whole backside of the weir, which was riprap, big limestone riprap, got washed down to the bottom, and the Corps of Engineers had to rebuild the whole backside of those weirs. So, but the same thing is going on again.
Yep.
Because the system won't take the water.
It's just amazing. They succeeded in dredging Catahoula. I don't know if that's making a lot of difference. Catahoula Lake had certainly big mud flats and all, but I think it's still maintaining a pretty good channel according to my depth meter. But it certainly was filling in, and that's another success story. St. Martin Parish got that done. They cleared it out, and it's another passage that has a lot better flow in getting that water down to the bay where it belongs. So thank you, Dave.
Yeah, I think we're making progress, but it's slow. So.
Well, and every little bit helps, when we, just an awareness of how it works and what we can do, the fact that we can turn pumps off and drop the swamps off of Bayou Catawba a foot or two, that's what made the big difference in Barry. The computer models showed that we were going to flood in Lafayette. People were putting all these inner tubes around their homes and to emptying their house of the furniture, and the computer models were 5 feet off, both at Washington and in Lafayette, because the swamp was drained.
The system was drained before the storm hit.
And we allowed the swamps to handle the the 300,000 or 400,000 surface acre feet went to the swamp instead of people's homes. So, thank you again for calling, Dave, and,
Well, thank you, Aaron.
all right.
All right,
Good. Yes.
bye-bye.
All right, thank you all for listening. I want to thank everybody that called in. We're making progress on, in dealing with the flood. Main progress is understanding it and getting, people on board to take that understanding into solutions. That's happening. So I want to thank St. Martin Parish. They dredged Catahoula, which is going to make a difference, and they got Joe Day going, and it is working. So thank you all, St. Martin Parish.